We have our town administrator, Matthew Wojcik, here today with the finance director, Jean Lovett. We have Lori Burrows from Representative McKenna's office.
Jubert.
Oh, Jubert. Lori Burrows, Jubert. Yes. And Chief Nick Miglianico.
Morning.
Joining us today. So this is kind of an information session. We'd like to keep it kind of flowing, so we'd like to limit it to maybe one question each. And if somebody wants to tail on another question, that would be okay. And we'd like to keep it a very positive environment for our guests today. So,
I would like to speak for the record. I prefer coming on World Smile Day.
yes.
No problem.
Oh yeah, that's your favorite day.
It is my favorite day.
No, it's not. Well, I'll do the best I can. So, our president would probably criticize me for being low energy today because I have a lingering back injury from my childhood that has flared up.
Come to
I'm doing the best I
exercise.
can not to talk to anybody's back. So I'll do the best I can to keep my energy up and get us through this. I'm not looking for sympathy, it's just a fact.
You should
I'm
come to
normally-
our exercise.
Normally a little bit more limber than this, but it's a little bit distracting. First of all, an apology. I know that the sound quality of the meeting the other night, if you were not there, it was very hard for you to follow on television, and it's something that we're working on. Where's Pat? We're still working on it to get that right so that we can have those broadcasts and you can watch them and learn without having to have additional meetings and sessions. I don't want to say a whole lot. I'd rather just hear questions and comments. I think the way the chairman of the board ended the meeting the other night is kind of where I have to pick up. I'm not an elected official. I'm an appointed official. I work for you. My job is to get you accurate information. If I don't know the answer, my job is to tell you that I don't know the answer and that I'll look into it and get back to you. Nor is it my role to advocate for one option over the other. My role is to provide you and my bosses, the Board of Selectmen, with choices. Choices that are based upon where we are financially, what the law says, and to implement whatever choice it is that the people make at town meeting and at the ballot box. So it's the faithful execution of your will as the people of the town. The town does have two choices this year in the budget process. One is a base budget, which is a balanced budget, and it is based upon the revenue resources of the town and our expense structure. The other budget is the so-called override or contingent budget, which is if the people vote yes, both at town meeting and the day after town meeting, we would have additional revenues to spend, and then the town meeting warrant identifies where those additional money would go the first year after the override passes. So what is the difference? The difference is the amount of revenue that the town has to work with to meet its expenses. I'm going to try to make this more interesting by asking questions. Because of Proposition 2.5, how many of you think that if the town raises taxes 2.5% a year, the town's revenues go up by 2.5% a year? Nobody thinks that? Because you think I'm asking you a trick question?
Repeat that, please.
So if your tax bill as a homeowner goes up 2.5% a year, does that mean the town's total revenues go up 2.5% that year?
I would say yes.
The total revenues of the town are made up of two pieces. Might actually be easier for me to stand up. Two pieces. One is the revenue we get from taxpayers, and the other piece is the revenue the town gets from state aid. State aid doesn't change much from year to year. State aid is just about a little bit less than half of your budget. About half of all the money the town government in Douglas spends comes from state money. So if we raise your taxes 2.5% a year, The revenues of the town go up by half of 2.5%. They go up about 1.25%. But you gotta tack on a couple of places where we do a little bit better. So there are some local receipts, some excise taxes, which change from year to year on your car, and a couple of other, loosey-goosey categories that aren't very big. But the fact of the matter is, revenues only grow about 1.5% a year. Our expenses go up more quickly than that. There are things that the town buys that other people don't have as part of your household budget. You don't have to pay into a pension plan anymore, I think, most of us in this room. The town has to pay money into the Worcester County retirement system every year, and that account is growing at 9% a year. The health insurance budget for the town is based on the market for healthcare, and it's also based upon the claims experience of the town. So if our employees file a lot of claims year over year, our rates go up. There's no surprise there. This year, we actually are very excited. We had a good year for health insurance, but our health insurance premiums are going up 5.9%. So those growth accounts are constantly putting upward pressure on the town's budget. They're growing more rapidly than our ability to pay the bills. So, I grew up with my parents, God rest their souls. My mom's still alive, but they had a bad habit of spending more money than they were getting in. And there's ways to do that. Credit cards, second mortgage, there's things that you can do in private life that a government cannot do. We must balance a budget every single year. So that's in a nutshell. I'm making it very simple, but there are a bunch of accounts in the town, but those are the two big ones, pension and health insurance, that are growing more rapidly than our revenue base grows. So what has been done for many, many years in the town of Douglas is you have found ways to cut the budget and save money. And that was one of those really long lists that was put up on the screen the other night in a font that was so small nobody could possibly read it. But it was a list of all the things the town has done since 2008 to try to save money. So you've been reducing the number of positions you have, especially at Town Hall, for quite a long time. You reduced the number of positions you had here at the Senior Center by a couple of people over the course of the last 10 years. The town has also done other things. The town partnered with the developer of a solar farm to try to get energy credits to reduce the town's electricity bill by 20%. The recreation budget went away. And, I'm not just saying this for Chris's benefit or because I like John, but you gotta acknowledge performance where you have performance. The highway department now has fewer people than it's ever had. They have picked up all the responsibilities for recreation. And the mechanic at the highway barn now does as much work as he can for all the departments. He fixes whatever needs to be fixed, mostly fire department equipment as well as highway. Those are things that you don't spend money on. You don't send those things out of town. You're not hiring somebody to cut the grass at the parks. It's all coming out of highway, and they have fewer people to do it. This has been going on for quite a long time, and I think Gene and I, when we started the budget process this year, we kind of had to scratch our heads a little bit. We're running out of places to make those changes. There have been two major changes in health insurance over the last 5 years,
5 years.
where the town switched, because Blue Cross was getting crazy expensive, so the town switched, saved some money there. And now the town has a health insurance policy that has, most of you have heard of this, the high deductible plan. So the first several $1,000s, $2,000 if you're an individual, $4,000 if you're a family, come out of your pocket before your health insurance kicks in if you're a town employee. So there's this constant effort to do things more efficiently, but we're running out of places where we can do that. Now, I've identified a couple as a new administrator. We can convert our streetlights over to much more efficient bulbs and save a lot of money on our electricity. we can probably, although Gene knows how I'm tearing my hair out, we're trying to figure out the pricing on our office supplies, because WB Mason is very slippery. They're charging everybody a different price. So we're gonna dive down on that and make sure that they're dealing with us in an honest fashion, in a fair fashion, between us and the school department. But at the end of the day, on the town side of the budget, we're running out of good ideas to save a lot of money. Those other accounts are growing so much more rapidly too, that even those savings ideas we come up with, they're just not enough. On the school side, what we call education, let's leave your local public schools out of the conversation for just 1 minute. A lot of you have probably heard about Blackstone Valley Tech, so-called BVT. Students in Douglas have the choice to apply to that school. It is a regional voc tech school, and if they are admitted, they have every right to go. And the town folk pay for that. It's much more expensive than sending those students to our local public schools. And the superintendent at BVT has taken the position that he doesn't have to limit the number of students he can take from Douglas. If they make the grade and he wants them there, he invites them and they go. Over the past couple of years, enrollment at BVT is through the roof. This year alone, their bill to us is $250,000 higher than it was last year. And last year it was, I wasn't here, but last year it was, oh, you hate to do this, but you can round to the nearest 10,000.
It was close to 200.
Close to 250,000, so you're going up about $500,000 in just 2 years. The other thing that, and this one's another one that kind of bugs me a lot, when we go out to bid for school buses, for the company that's going to drive the kids around, we get one bid back. And we end up settling a contract without real competition. And this year, the school bus contract is going to go up 13.6%. So if you're keeping track in your mind of the things I'm keeping track of, BVT is up by a lot, the school buses are up by a lot, the pension, which we can't change, is up 9%, and health insurance is up 5.9%. So those are the things that are kind of pushing the expense side of the budget up, and up. So there are two paths you can take to this situation. And that's the two choices that the town has. One is continue to cut spending in a way that gets you to a balanced budget. There is no if. The trustees might have some money left to keep the library open for a little while if they choose to do that, if they're able to do that. But from the town's perspective, the library would close July 1st. We don't have the money to pay those salaries, to pay for the health insurance, and to keep the building open. We don't. So that generates a savings that's big enough to close the hole. It's about $227,000 in the library's budget, but plus their health insurance, it comes up to about $240,000, $250,000. That's the biggest chunk of the savings. The other proposal in the basic budget is to not level fund the schools, but to actually cut them. To take them down to the very lowest level allowed by law, which is called, and they have so many fancy words at the Department of Education, it kills me, required net school spending. So those two things together account for almost $500,000 in savings, and that's how we would balance the budget under the base budget. The override works differently. The override would make $1.5 million in revenue available. About $640,000 of that would go to the schools to not only not cut them, but to bring them up to the superintendent's request. The library would be left open. Oh, look, a toy dog. And then there's the other thing that so it's kind of like a long conversation, but I'll just put it this way, is about $553,000 total out of the override proceeds that would be used to buy the things that people use to do their jobs. Above and beyond what we've already requested for this year, it would be another $500,000, with a good chunk of that being for highway. We like to laugh at other people sometimes, right? And it's always nice to make fun of Rhode Island. I'm from Rhode Island, so I know the place pretty well. The DOT director was on the radio this morning saying that they're gonna fix 700 bridges in just 10 years because the state neglected its assets for that long. The bridges didn't go away. People didn't stop using the bridges. The bridges were still there. They just got more and more and more unsafe. To the point where now, the people of that state have to ante up in the form of tolls and bond money that they have to pay back to fix those 700 bridges in the next 10 years. At the municipal level, the same kind of thing can happen. If you don't replace an ambulance when it's due, if you don't replace a fire engine when it's due, you save money that year. You balance the budget that year. If you don't buy police cruisers that year, you save money. But it didn't go away. You still need cruisers, you still need an ambulance. And the problem is, in my perspective anyway, it's very inefficient to keep vehicles on the road, paying thousands of dollars to fix them every time they break down, and then have to replace it anyway. It's really kind of silly pattern. And look, no sob stories. I grew up in a house where there wasn't a lot of money, and when I was a kid, we had a 1964 Ford Falcon that I think was still on the road in 1984. So, you do what you can with what you got, but eventually, you just start to realize, I can't deliver the service in a consistent way anymore, and it's costing people too much money. Why is inconsistent service a bigger problem than it looks like at first? The town makes a certain promise when it shows up at your house with an ambulance. We're pretty much telling you we're there to help, and we're gonna save, if you need to go to the hospital, we're gonna get you there safely. It is not a trivial matter for that ambulance to break down while you're in it. And then we need to call mutual aid to come get you to the hospital. Time is muscle, right? They all tell us that. Time is muscle when you have a heart attack. So if you're sitting in the ambulance, you're getting good care, but they only have so many supplies. They can only push so much into your body. They need to get you to the hospital. And if you're sitting there, what if it happens that you don't get there on time and there's damage done, and now you were looking for somebody to sue? Well, I got news for you. If the town was aware the ambulance wasn't working, and we put you in it anyway, we have a problem. And that's kind of where we are. With a lot of these things, we have a highway department that doesn't have a chipper. So how many trees fell this winter? We dragged them all into the back of a truck and we dumped them at the pit behind the soccer field over off the main road. It's all just sitting there. Is that any way to do business? I mean, it really isn't. There's a more efficient way to fill potholes. We send guys out, buy coal patch at $140 a ton. They get that cold stuff and they pound it into the hole. How long does it last?
2 days.
2 days, right? There's another device. Hey, look, it costs money. It costs $38,000, but it's an unfortunate name. It's called a hot box. But it's a box. And you put hot asphalt inside it, and there's a jacket of hot oil around it that stays hot. For $125 a ton, you get your hot patch, drive it back to town, it's still hot. You put it in the ground, how long is it going to stay? If you tamp it right, and it's my pet peeve, you put a little bit of sand over the top of it so that nobody sticks to the asphalt, it'll last. It's going to last. It's going to get you through the winter. Now that DPW worker, that highway worker, isn't running out and filling the same hole 3 times, and you're not spending hundreds of dollars on coal patch. You're being smart about how you use your time and your resources. That's what we're trying to do. If we don't have the flexibility to do those kinds of things, it's a less optimal situation. So, at the end of the day, and I'll finish with this, public service is about doing the best you can with what the people give you. And so, if the override doesn't pass and we have the base budget in place, we'll continue to try to do more with less. It's a courtesy for the people who are doing that job to come back to you and say, it's getting a little dicey here at the end. Because there's, and the last thing is, what about long-term perspective? Why does it matter? It matters because if you drive down the street and and you can only see 10 feet in front of your car. Is that safe? Chief, is that safe? To stare at the ground 10 feet in front of your car?
No.
Are you reasonably sure you're gonna get 10 feet?
Get 10 feet,
You get the 10 feet.
might not get 11.
You might not get 11. So, in the world of municipal finance and municipal administration, projecting a budget is considered a necessary practice. Because as you're driving your car down the street, you gotta look 50 feet ahead, not 10. It doesn't do anybody any good to keep putting things off, because the final solution that you need to fix it at the end is that much more expensive. I used to have arguments with my dad because he wouldn't service the furnace every year. And I'd come home and I'd say, Dad, you haven't serviced the furnace for 4 years. You gotta be kidding me, it's $100 a year. Instead, we blew out the burner unit on the front and it was much more than $400. So that's that old saying, penny wise, pound foolish. You actually save the taxpayer a lot more money if you have a plan than if you don't. So that's my little spiel. I know I went way longer than I thought I would, but I thought it was appropriate since so much of what we said the other night didn't get picked up on the microphone. That's pretty much a summary of what the conversation was. So, man.
Do we get any money from the lottery?
Yeah, they don't call it lottery anymore. I'll let Jean do this dance.
They don't call it lottery. They actually changed it a couple years ago. It's called unrestricted general government aid.
UGA.
UGR. So they renamed it. Some would say that they rescinded their promise to the local communities, and I want to stand up. But we do get local aid from unrestricted general government aid, which is the old term for the lottery, new term for the lottery.
That doesn't help.
It all helps. It's just not enough.
It does help. It has that weird effect, like I said before, of kind of locking you into limited revenue. Here's another little, well, let's play Trivial Pursuit today a little bit.
What is the amount we give, Jane?
About that.
I wish I had Patrice. You told me not to bring my big black book.
Yeah. Wouldn't have room for it.
I'll get back to you when it gets
All right, well, I'm doing my Trivial Pursuit. There are 53 towns in Massachusetts that are about the same size as Douglas. Between 6,000 people and 10,000 people. We're right, so a little bit in the high end of that, 8,400. Of those 53 towns, raise your hand if you think Douglas gets a lot less state aid than everybody else.
Yeah, I think they do.
Douglas ranks second of those 53 towns in the amount of aid that we get from the state. The average amount of state aid for those 53 cities, 53 towns, is $3 million. Douglas gets 10. So more than 2.5 times the average. So as I said earlier, that's a mixed blessing, right? That's money you don't have to pay as taxpayers. You're not on the hook for that 10 million every year, but it doesn't grow. In fact, we're in this crazy system where the state buys more and more forest land, but pays us less and less every year for it. And it's one of the accounts that's down this year.
And if the tax rate goes up, which it will go up to 1760, will also be second to Blackstone.
Yeah.
The total taxes here in the valley. And when I say valley, I'm not including Worcester or Leicester. I'm meaning Blackstone Valley proper, things that touch us.
Yeah. I know that people compare tax rates, and on one level, it's a very fair thing to do. Because $1,000 of value here, $1,000 of value in Leicester, $1,000 of value in some, I know the town. So Westport is $1,000. It's $1,000 everywhere. The difference is in valuation and what the real estate market and the real estate appraisers say your property is worth, depending on whether or not you're in Douglas or in Leicester or in Westport, and then the total base of the town. So the actual average single-family home tax bill in Douglas is not the lowest and it's not the highest. It's right around 36. Out of those 53, it's relatively low at about $4,700 a year. Relatively low. Blackstone's is actually $4,900. There are towns with low tax rates, but you pay more on your house because your house's value is higher. Douglas, to me, is fascinating because it's so different from a lot of other places that I've worked and thought about. Almost all of your tax levy comes from the residential tax base. About 94% of all the taxes levied in Douglas are on residential homes. You don't have very much commercial base. But then within that residential category, the overwhelming majority of your homes are worth roughly the same amount compared to the rest of the world. I mean, you've got very few homes in town that are worth $1 million. You have very few that are worth $100,000. Most of them are right around $290,000, give or take $60,000. They're right. So everybody, financially speaking, not in terms of your home budget, but the number you get, everybody kind of has the same experience. And it's a very different situation, because in a town like, let's go local here, not far away. Actually, I won't speculate about Auburn, though I think they have a split rate. But some of the bigger cities, like a Springfield, they tax homes at one rate and they tax business at a much higher rate. And that's how they get by some of this. They have a big commercial base, but they also use the authority under the law to tax their commercial properties at a much higher rate. So they make, economic development for them makes a lot of sense.
So question, and just for background, I spent 8 years on finance.
Yeah.
I was its chairman, and I'm quite involved, and as you can well tell. But now I'm a member of the senior citizens group, because I retired, so I know their pain, and I know their issues. And at least I think I know some of their issues, because I suspect some of their issues are my issues. So when I hear that we stopped using free cash, and I understand what free cash is all about, but we pulled the rug out, right out from under it, and we zeroed it out in this budget. I understand the intricacies that go along with planning on it. We get back.
Dennis, can you speak up a little bit for the people in the back?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry. So when we look at, I'm sorry if I'm not bellowing. I will bellow. But just don't tell the missus that I'm bellowing. The tax rates, as you were talking about, have a direct effect on what people's assessed value. So some people are going to pay as little as $300, some people are going to pay as much as $1,000. And I'm going to try to average it out to stay in the middle. But when we pull out the uses of free cash completely, you know, I call it pulling the rug out from under. And I understand the intricacies, and we can never, you know, it's always not necessarily a great thing to plan on using, you know, one-time revenues for operational budgets. But, you know, truth be told, we've been doing that for 20 years. You know, all along the way to some margin and degree. That if we used, and I'll just give an example, some of the free cash that we would anticipate, $227,000 for the library, done. $193,000 for the school. Last budget reported that they were in deficit, done. Now granted, they would have had to use their circuit accounts. But if you're asking me personally to dig into my wallet more to support the override, to pay $6,000 towards somebody's wages, I said, I'd love my wages to go up by $6,000 personally. Now, on the other side of the coin, you said that the dollar amounts from the tax, from the override would be used for capital items. And you had indicated that most of it is highway related. Well, highway related only counts for $157,000 of that total amount. And there are other capital items here that could come from other funding sources, which Gene is a master at, I might add, in being able to find those funding sources. So when we're talking about these kinds of things, we've kind of manufactured the problem because we pulled the rug out from under of using any free cash, except for capital items, which is really now an operational override paying for one-time items. And come July 1st, we may in fact still have, if my friend Bob Bauer were here, he would say perhaps another 1.5 million in free cash to spend, in addition to the override dollar. So somewhere along the line, you know, the taxpayers have done their fair share. So why wasn't there a gradual integration or reduction of free cash usage, as opposed to let's pull a rug out from everybody right now, and now we have what we have in front of us? Because you're right, and if you talk education, 1.5 was cut. Because 2 years ago, 1.5 was just for the school system. So this isn't the end of the kind of raises, because all the things you mentioned are out of your control. Debt, which we're overburdened with, as you once called, 20%, 116% of our communities. The insurance and education. 3 things that are out of our control, all essentially. If Fitzpatrick comes in next year and adds another $300,000, this 1.5 isn't going to go very far. Maybe 2, maybe 3 years if we're lucky. So that's the problem I'm having with what I would call the sales pitch. That's the problem I'm having buying in. And I've been here 40-something years.
You threw a lot of information out
Right.
there, so I'm gonna try to just comment on a couple
Well,
of
they
things.
said I only have one question, so I figured I'd get
Yeah, that doesn't count. That's the question A through C in under 1. First of all, let me get back to the original question. We received $729,000 in unrestricted general government aid for FY18, which is the current year one. Free cash. It's called free, it's called, you know, I don't like the term. It's something that we get certified by the Department of Revenue when I submit my balance sheet at the end of a fiscal year. So at the end of FY18, on June 30, you know, during the summer, we'll be closing the books. And then I tell the state, this is what the departments didn't spend, and this is what we collected in excess of what we budgeted. Those are 2 big components of what they call free cash. And the reason why you don't use those as a funding source for an operating, it's kind of like using your tax return to pay for the light and the heat. Your tax return may not be there next year, but you need to heat and you need to, you know, heat the building, you need to turn the lights on. So that's one reason why we don't use it. We like to use what is called free cash for a non-reoccurring expense. We love to use it for capital.
But hasn't Kaczynski used it for the last 7
We
years?
have, and last year we went to what we thought was an extreme case, of 600,000. And we did that knowing that if something didn't change, that the library would be closing the following year. It was to give the department time to kind of see where we were in FY18, and that was what was said last year. And it's unfortunate, it's very sad for me to have any department on the table to be closed. But the reason why you don't use it is because it's not promised. You can't guarantee it's going to be in the next year. We did have $1.5 million certified in free cash for FY18, so when I closed the books in 17, we had that. Just one account was school transportation. School transportation closed out, turned back almost 200,000. This year at the special town meeting, they need 53,000. So I know that department will not have any turnbacks. We had a insurance settlement for the HVAC fire at the municipal center. Again, a capital project had scheduled to be completed, wasn't completed before the fire started, so then, you know, we had to deal with the Clinton insurance claim. We received money, but we had already fixed the problem, so when the insurance money came in, that kind of closed into free cash. So that, you know, was, so there's, you gotta look at, I always say it, you gotta look at the story behind the numbers, and look at what makes up that. Our biggest turnback on the revenue side is probably motor vehicle excise. We are prudently conservative with the amount that we say we're gonna collect in motor vehicle excise, because I don't know whether or not you're gonna go out to buy a new car next year.
Yeah, you do. The assessors do.
Yeah, but you can't guarantee that. As the cars age, the motor vehicle excise receipts go up and then they start to trickle down. And we just don't know that cycle, so we are prudently conservative with that. It's not a good practice to use it. We have, last year was the highest or the most we've used for any operating budget, with the intention that if something didn't change, that the library would be closing. And that's why the Board of Selectmen agreed to do the 600,000. We have some things that are out of our control. And BBT is a big one, 243,000. Their budget went up over almost 5%. None of our expense budgets, other than health insurance and Worcester Regional, go up over 5%. So we are dealing with some things that are outside of our control. But that's what it's doing, is putting more of a strain on the departments. And, you know, if you asked me where we've suffered over the last years, I'd ask you to take a look at the capital list. And the fact that we postponed cruises over years, and the fact that ambulance is now on it, it's 2011, what are we replacing?
2007.
The 7, but the 11 is our newest ambulance. So those are the things where I see that we have not met what we should have been doing over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I would only add a couple of points. One is that the overall goal in municipal finance is very stable, predictable, balanced, change over time. You take the volatility out, you don't shock people, you try to avoid being shocked. You try to fix problems before they become litigation. You try to address building issues or employee issues before they become a lawsuit. It is appropriate to use some quantity of free cash every year, because what we do is we slightly over budget for expenses because we don't want to expose the town to foreseeable problems. So you set aside money in the health insurance budget for a couple extra plans because your employees might change their mind. A school teacher who's 25 could still be on their parents' coverage. When she turns 27, she can't be on her parents' coverage anymore, and she might be married, she might have a child, come to us with a family plan. So in order to avoid, oh my God, they need a family plan, it's in the budget. And at the end of the year, if it's not spent, it's there to become part of free cash. That's appropriate. There should be some amount of that. And because that was appropriated for operations, it could be used for operations. In my mind, you try to squirrel away enough to meet the snow and ice requirement at special town meeting. So that they're always kind of canceling each other out. And, you know, I don't like pulling numbers out of my hat with Jean next to me because she'll beat me all the way back to town hall. But it's probably around $250,000 a year. It's okay to take some money out of the piggy bank because you know it's coming back. Where the town has gotten a little bit dangerously more dependent, I add the snow and ice to the appropriation for next year's operations. Because to me, that's the full reliance upon free cash. And now you're up around 800,000. And it's about 6.6% of your budget. That is a scary number because you can't just wave a magic wand and make 6.6% appear if you fall short. So going back to how can we raise money at 1.5% a year? Well, if we know that we're short 6.5% every single year and we're just going to plan on being that much short, and then the taxes don't come in, or we have emergencies on the operations side where we pay out the budget, those people take those health insurance plans, right? So at the end of the year, now we're stuck. That's what we're trying to avoid. So some communities have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble running structural deficits around 7.5%. So you're starting to kind of, you're not there yet, but you're getting a little too close. And I don't think it's my role to not call that out for people so they can make a decision.
One thing, I think that's a good thing to do. That's kind of the role.
Yeah.
Before Jean, it was Louise Redding, who I'm very familiar with, and if you think she's a tough case, you should have met Louise. And the key is that you've pulled it out, you've pulled the rug completely out. There's a difference between a gradual decline of usage, you know, and zeroing it out completely.
Yeah.
It creates and manufactures a lot more of a crisis situation. And with things that are out of your controls, for the most part, the three big ones, the three big budget busters, there is very little wiggle room that this amount of money is going to go very far in the long run. I know people have been going around saying 5 year this, 5 year this. You know, and then now we're back to 3 years before free cash starts reintroducing itself. So the point is that seniors, which I'm now part of that group, proud to say, we have made a living out of making those tough decisions. Well, I can't get the house remodeled this year, so I may have to focus on one window. So we make those tough decisions as you have to make them. So there has to be some kind of a balance before you say, geez, let's just add another $300 or $400 to the senior citizens that are in this room on top of the reevaluation. And my taxes went up about $490 overall because my assessment value went up. So I'm gonna add another $400 to me. I don't wanna be the one that has to explain that to the missus.
Well, I've got 2 responses. You're up to 3 questions now.
Okay. I'll stop.
That doesn't have the ABCD.
Yeah,
Right.
that's just a
Right.
refresher of the ABCD. Yeah.
But, I mean, you make a good point. My response to it on free cash is, yes, the plan would be to take it out for a year or 2, to be able to start using it again. And what are we gonna do in the intervening time? Buy the stuff we need so we don't have to buy it, so that we take the pressure out of future years. It's building up a basis for stability and efficient operations. And then, as you need to use more free cash in the future, you're not regretting the fact that you didn't get that tool or that device that makes your operations more efficient. That's how I look at it. And the last point you make, and I tried to make this point the other night, and I think the chairman made it, and it's, in all sincerity, we live in America. We vote our self-interest. That is the freedom that so many people have fought and died for on our behalf, and it's a treasure. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone. If you feel it's not in your best interest to vote for an override, nobody should judge you. That's your life, that's your decision, and for those of us who aren't in your position yet, we can see it coming, but for the grace of God go I, right? So let's just recognize that that difference of opinion is absolutely legitimate and totally acceptable and socially shouldn't be an issue between people who are friends otherwise. That's silly. I just bring it back to the point where we think it's our job in the administration to explain to people what those choices are, and that, at least from my perspective, I can foresee a future where, God bless us all, we're all still here 5 years from now. If we don't do the override, we have to come back with an even bigger one to fix the problem then. It's one of those things where, you know, when Prop 2.5 passed, I was alive. I think I was 10. But no, I'm going to ask, many of you are locals and have been here for a very long time. How many people lived in Douglas when Prop 2.5 passed? How many people total do you think lived in town? Chris, somebody help me out here.
3,000, give or take.
About 3,000 people.
3 years ago.
So the law locked in a 2.5% tax increase for every year after that, maximum. But you don't have 3,000 people anymore, you have 8,400. And the service demands of towns change over time. And that's why many towns have done maybe one override since Prop 2.5 passed of substantial size. The wealthier towns, they do it all the time. Anybody here from Upton? God bless you. I think they've done like 5.
Yeah, Upton's.
And that's, you know, it is what it is. Nobody in Douglas wants to be Upton on that score. But the taxpayers of the town of Upton decided that's what they wanted to do. The majority did. And so that's how they ended up where they were. So I can honestly tell you that right around 10,000, 12,000 inhabitants, a town starts to expand its services and has to find a way to do it. That's pretty much the population level where having 2 police officers on the road is no longer safe at all, and you need 3. And that's pretty much, you know, right around 10,000. And that's usually paramedics match police officers. You would have 3 ambulance staff on once you get to be a community of that size. And there's a science to it. I don't have a degree in it, so I'll do the best I can to explain it. But, every 10, 15,000 people or so, municipalities face those growing pains. And some of them do a better job of dealing with them than others.
I am a senior citizen, and I live on a very limited income. I don't own my own home any longer, but I do pay rent, so my landlord's taxes, I'm sure, will go up if the override goes through. Personally, I want it. It's not just to keep the senior center open or the library. Those are wonderful things, especially for us in our age. But I'm 74 years old, and in my lifetime, my cost of living has never gone down. I have had to accommodate my life to work the best things for me. For instance, a couple of years ago, I started losing my hearing, and I saw what my mom went through because of that. I had to bite the bullet and buy hearing aids, and because our medical doesn't cover stuff like that, I had to pay out of pocket for it. But this was my choice. I'm not wealthy, but I don't want to go deaf either. A couple weeks ago, I had to have some dental work done. Again, I had to pay out of pocket, and it was a large amount of money. So I think for us as a town, we have to decide, do we want our town to fall apart? Do I want Nick to run with 2 officers on duty when there really should be 3 officers on duty so we can be safe? I personally had a heart attack a few years ago, and I got excellent care from the EMTs, excellent care. Had that ambulance broken down on the way to the hospital, I might not be here today. Those things to me are important. Life is always about, we're gonna spend more money. This year, with my Social Security check, when I retired, I was paying $90 a month for my Medicare, which I had no idea I had to pay for Medicare. Hello, I thought it was free. This year, when I got my new form from Social Security, my Medicare cost went up to $138. And I have a lot of health issues, and I need good medical insurance. So, out of my pocket, I pay $138 for Medicare. I pay $200 and something for Harvard Pilgrim, and I also have to have a drug plan. But that is important to me. It's very important. Do I have to go without other things because of it? Yeah, I do. But I have to focus on what's important. And for me, to keep this town running the way it should run, so that we're safe, so that we have, John does an impeccable job keeping our roads open with what he has. I didn't realize that he had cuts and that now we got one person doing 5 jobs and getting paid for one. I'm proud of this town. I love living here. And I want us all as a community to be able to have the things that we should have. The library for the people who go there. Us, this is so important to us. And I know the schools are important to other people, but the police department and the highway and our fire department, they're also important. So I'm gonna vote for it, and my rate goes up, it goes up. I'll accommodate. So.
Question, ma'am?
Yes, I have a question. On, say, a property is valued at $200,000, how much would that increase over last year in taxes?
I only know the answer for the 296,100, and that's 453.
At 214, at 214,000, at $1.53 per thousand of the override, you're around 328, So you're probably gonna be a little.
$228?
So $328.
Would go up.
It would go up by attacking, and that's on a $214,000 assessed value. So if you're 200,000, it's gonna be, you know,
A little less.
Very close.
yeah,
I
a
understand.
little less than the 328, but not a whole lot.
Now, the other question I do have, I know I'm only allowed one, and I do understand the needs.
That was
of-
easy, so you
I
can.
understand the needs of the town. The other question I have, when you vote on a 2.5, when does that stop? In 1 year, 5 years, or never?
It doesn't stop.
So in other words, we go up 2.5 this year, the town can go up 2.5 next year, and 2.5 after that, so now we got 5, we got 7.5, and that increase.
But as Matt explained, the 2.5 isn't necessarily a 2.5 increase in expenditures because we don't.
Yeah, but that's a different issue. I think
Right.
really the plan for either the base budget or the override budget is that the town is going to continue to use Prop 2.5 every year regardless. So the base will grow, the levy will grow 2.5% every year for the next 5 years, no matter which budget passes. The difference is,
I
The
didn't
difference
expect it
is-
to go down, sir.
no. The difference
It
with
always goes up.
The difference with the override, the difference with the override is that $300 difference.
Mhm.
So it'll be add 300 this year, add 300 plus 2.5% the next year. So there is that compounding effect. But there are two lines that go like this. So you had your hand up.
The one other thing I do have, I know I'm taking 3 questions here, is every time we have voted on things, and then I hear the aftermath, and I will say, like, seeing the police chief is here, I'll say him, say he was supposed to get $20,000 more. That's a small amount, I know. And then, after the fact, they say, well, we couldn't do that, we only gave him 15, we had to cut back. Why do they do that? And I've heard that from people that work in the town hall. When they come out and tell us they're gonna give so much to a department, and then they cut them back after, they say, well, we couldn't do it.
We have to balance the budget at the end of the day. So our revenues have to equal our expenses. So for instance, and I'll pick on the state a little bit here, sorry.
That's okay.
We get a house one number. The governor tells us in January, this is what we're gonna give you for next year. We don't find out the actual number until July. So we've already started the year, you've had your first town meeting, and then they say, sorry, you know, things didn't come in as expected, so we're not gonna give you as much. So at the fall town meeting, we do have to adjust for anything that we expected to come in at a certain level that didn't come in at that level. And my argument with them is, tell me in January the true number of what I'm gonna get for the following year, and then we can plan accordingly. But we always have to make, you know, you're starting the budget process in January for June, July 1st, and you're predicting for an entire year after. We have to make adjustments based on the information that we have, and then, you know, we have to adjust to the future town meetings if something changes. So the intention is not to give him less money. It's not.
But it happens. But it happens.
That's,
But when I ask them, and I call him in the office and I explain to him, and I say, this is why.
Right.
And-
And we work very well together. What we do is we submit our budget for what we think we need. And we work with the town administrator and Jean throughout the whole process, as it's a long process. Once we start from the beginning, the first thing we submit, and every department head advocates for their department and tries to get what they need to run their department. But there's just not enough money to go around, so unfortunately, everybody has to make some cuts at some point.
I mean, you'll see at the special, and everything, we try to do everything at town meeting. So, and you get a flyer, and you'll be receiving it shortly with the FinCom flyer, which explains where we think FY19, beginning July 1st, where the money's gonna go. But we have 2 other town meetings to adjust for that number. We have the fall town meeting. So if Nick were to say, hey, you know what, I had these things happen, I didn't know about it in June, I didn't know about it in March when we were preparing the budget, I need to adjust for that. We will have the fall town meeting, and we also have the spring town meeting, which is the town meeting that happens before the annual. So we have 3 town meetings to adjust for any year's budget, and we have to utilize them. The town's a little different from the school. So when you vote our budget, you're voting salaries, expense for every department on our side. So town clerk salary, town clerk expense, town accountant salary, town accountant expense. The school, and we can't, I can't say, hey, you know what, Chris has a little extra, I'm gonna give it to Nick. I can't do that without town meeting vote. So we have to go back to town meeting to do those things. The school gets voted as one line, and they can move that money within the line. So if they need a paraprofessional at the high school that they didn't budget for, they can, without town meeting's permission, move money from the elementary to fund that. We just don't have the flexibility. So anything that we do on our side, you will see coming back at a town meeting and a town meeting vote.
Now you can go.
I'm Marie Hebert. This is my husband Raymond. Ray is a veteran. Ray has no insurance because we cannot afford 2 insurances in our house. I was a general manager for 40 years to a company. I had the keys to the company. When I left there after 40 years, I lost my 401k. When I left there, a doctor called me at work and told me to get out of there because I may not make it till 3:30. That's how sick I was at the time. So I lost about $900 more a month. So we are living on approximately $30,000 per year as senior citizens because we lost most everything. My husband was in an ambulance from Douglas. They would not take him to the VA, and he's a veteran. $40,000 out of our savings account. And you expect us to keep going up every year, we're going to lose our house. And if we can't pay for our taxes, we can't pay for an apartment.
All I can say to that is, don't say you. I mean, I've already told you, if that's where you stand, then without any judgment otherwise, that's how you should vote. Because that is your legitimate place in life. That's where you are. And you should not only vote no, you can jump up and down.
It comes down to support the town or support yourself, and I'm not gonna eat dog food.
Matt, can I step in here for a minute? Being a veteran, if you get in touch with your veteran service officer.
We've done that.
Okay, and he should be able to help you out with chapter 115 money or see what other veteran services there are out there. You know, if
I got a question on that same subject, because it ties in. If we don't have an expense problem, which we can debate whether or not we have one or not, and it's a revenue problem, then we got a state representative person sitting right here, and I'm looking at the House 2 budget, saying that, wait a minute, you know, they took $30,000 off the tax rolls for the state park, and they added it to the state park, and now they're giving us pennies back on the dollar. On top of it, they've shorted us a little over $20,000 coming out of House 2. So McKenna's, what are our representatives really doing for the little town of Douglas? Because it is a revenue issue. If it's a revenue issue, then we got to attack where the revenue sources are shortchanging us.
there are 2 things that Joe and Brian have proposed. One of them is Bill H1581, which is the pilot program, so payment in lieu of taxes for the state forest. And what this proposes is that you can't receive a payment less than what you received the year before. And that's what is happening this year. So hopefully H1581 will go through committee, it'll pass, and it'll help with the problem of going, okay, in FY18 we're giving you $1, but in FY19 we're giving you 50 cents. So at least you're gonna have a basis and you're gonna know where that money is. The other thing they're looking at is the state park. Right now, there's $1 added to the fee to get in there, and that money goes into a fund for the police and fire, where they can choose where that money goes to help cover some of those costs. They're looking to add another $1 or more to that so that it'll help with Nick or Ken to buy, you know, updated equipment. So they do listen and they do care. So we are trying to work with it, but they're 2 out of 200 and something people there, and everybody has their agenda, and we're looking to get this passed. So please feel free to, when you see this going to committee, send emails, make calls to the committee members and say, hey, I live in Douglas, I want this to pass.
Sir, in the back.
Yeah, but at the same time where you're trying to maintain certain levels, is there any light at the end of this tunnel with unfunded mandates? You keep telling us here's something else you must do, but we're not gonna give you any money to do it. And it's frustrating for us because we've got a lot of talent here. I know we're older, but we can help if we have opinions we can offer. We're not asked them until it's too late. We have a chance now that there's a problem. What is it for Norfolk Aggie? That's a pet peeve of mine, but
24,000.
Well, you're
Yeah.
32,000 a year
Yeah, 24.
24.
Approximately 24, yeah.
plus transportation?
That's with transportation. The tuition's about 22 grand and then transportation's.
And University of Mass is 18? Really?
Good point.
Is there anything being done? I'd rather see you try and fail to get that lowered or help us in some way than to have nothing done.
So this is the first we've heard about that. We're here all the time. I'm here all the time. Patrice invites Joe in all the time. We have office hours here. Nobody's ever said anything to us about this. Be more than happy to look into it. However, I don't set, or we don't set.
This can't be the first time you're hearing that we are paying $30,000 a year to send kids to high school.
It is. Quite frankly, it is. We've known about school choice. We hear about Chapter 70 funding all the time. We hear about the cherry sheets, but nobody has ever come to us. And we've heard about special ed, the special ed payments being a year and a quarter behind. We've heard about, our special ed costs are out of control. This is the first I've ever heard about this.
And then it adds more frustration when you find out that you paid for one of these kids to go for a year or two, and then they dropped out. Because it's such a long ride, they're tired of doing the transportation every day. And there's no parental responsibility. You don't say to the parents, well, if your kid drops out, you should reimburse the town for each year we sent them. At least try something.
Get something done.
I will give you my card. Please feel free to email me any ideas that you have. We're open. There are so many things out there that we can't know everything, and we're always looking to be educated. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. I think the bottom line for a lot of these people here, they're on fixed incomes. How can they afford to pay that much more tax?
Yeah, I'll say it one more time, is if you can't, then you know what your vote is, and like I say, nobody should tell you what to do.
I brought that up at the last town meeting, and you know what they told me? Sit down, you're out of order.
You can't talk at a town meeting.
Sir?
Yes. We vote, we are taxing households, right? How about barren land? Land that's owned, let's use light industrial or industrial then. Are we upping their tax rate?
The town at the moment has a single tax rate. All property is taxed the same rate. You're touching on a pet peeve of mine. Gene's gonna scream now.
I like that.
You have your state forest. Then
Yeah,
next to it, you have a forest almost as big as the state forest that's in chapter 61.
I
And we
understand.
get nothing nothing for that, and I've asked, listen, that's all well and good, but land that's in the forest plan is supposed to have a forest management plan, which is more than just sitting there watching the leaves come out in the spring.
Correct.
So if it's going to be actively conserved for that purpose, then there should be compliance throughout the whole thing. And the compensation rate that the state allows us to take is outrageously low. What was, we figured 30, it was some tiny, tiny amount. $300 an acre, something ridiculous. In my lifetime, I've never imagined an acre of land costing $300. Ice-covered land in Antarctica is worth more than $300 an acre. So it's, I understand the policy behind trying to preserve open space and all the thinking that goes into that. But at some point, the decisions you made in the 60s and 70s on what things are worth and how much the town can realize for revenue need to be updated. And it's high time the state look at those programs.
All right.
You know, that's kind of,
That's that land there, that's tree farm. Okay, how about the industrial land? Is that tax rate up?
so if you split the tax rate right now and you set a second rate for commercial, for industry, you wouldn't get very much money because you have such a tiny amount of industry in this town. And it becomes a question of, if I only have a few people, and then I whack them with, let's say, a double tax, who's gonna wanna come here? So there, it creates a disincentive for what you're trying to do, which is get more of them here. Then once you got them all, then you whack them with the tax. I hate to sound cynical, but that's how it works. If, like I say, if the splitting the tax rate would only be a political gesture at this point, it wouldn't help you get revenue that you need to pay the bills.
Yeah. And what's the base for the state paying tax on the forest?
Believe it or not, it's actually higher than Chapter 61.
Yeah.
And what do we-
Available to appropriate is the key trick words.
Yeah.
So if they have money and it's available to appropriate, they will. I would almost make an argument based on these numbers that they're actually slicing $20,000 off of the money that they gave us last year, because somewhere along the line, someone has figured it out that, oh wait, we're giving them this surcharge, and their account's already up to $6,000 whole dollars. They should be able to use that money to off-end. Now, that's where we have a problem, and I don't care whether it's with the representative, or the senator, or Mike Moore in his district, but you have to make allegiances and alliances at State House to get anything through. So when I saw it come out of House 2, I'd almost bet $1 that the Senate is probably gonna go along with the House 2 recommendations, because that's their typical MO. So what they do is they chop it out from under us because it's available to appropriate. We never know what's available to appropriate. So they cut their legs right off from under, but we still don't do anything. Year after year after year after year. And I've been, 20 years involved with the politics here. And for 20 years, I've seen these arguments come and go. And I always rely on people like this guy, and before him it was Mike, and before him, and before him, and before him. We always rely on these people because that's who we elect to put in power. But that doesn't ever seem to come to fruition. So what do? We have to all take it on the nose. That's the problem we're in.
Could you let us know what is the necessary vote for the approval at town meeting for the override, and what is it at the ballot election day in order to get it approved?
Yeah, both majority.
Majority for both? And if the town doesn't approve it, what happens with the ballot vote at the town meeting if it doesn't get approved?
You already got them printed.
So, yeah, no, but if the, I hate to get technical with you, but at town meeting, because I gotta keep it straight myself. At town meeting, you're voting to spend the money that would be available if the override passes. If the override doesn't pass, then you don't have that money to spend. And the base budget, the first budget you'll vote on at town meeting, will be the budget.
But the selectmen can create another ballot election. So if you if you win it at the town meeting, which you typically do, that's at least been my experience, then you go to the ballot vote, and you lose it at the ballot by one vote. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, one vote. The selectmen can add another election with its own ballot to try it again to see if they can push it through. And because the appropriation's already been made, as long as it's done in the same year the appropriation was made. You jump in.
Yeah, I think, no, you're right, but it's 90 days.
Right, 90 days.
It's 90 days, so there is a time when it's not a whole year, it's 90 days. Or September 15th, whatever it comes.
First.
Ma'am?
Thank you. I wanted to say thank you for sharing this information. And could you please share with the seniors in the room who are property owners, the programs that they might be able to participate in to lower their property taxes?
I actually talked with the principal assessor yesterday, and I will leave some information with Patrice about the senior work-off program and the programs that we have available today. This will open up again for December 1st. And she will come down. She hesitated bringing any information today because there's nothing that you can apply for now. But she did tell me, Patrice, that she will come down in October to speak with the seniors and go through the programs that are available. So like September, October, we'll schedule the principal assessor to come down and meet with the seniors that want to meet with her. But I will leave this information here.
If the override fails, you obviously, or the selectmen have obviously talked about what their plan is going to be. They must have a priority list. Can you tell us what would happen, how the chips are going to fall in the next 5 years?
Well, let's stick to 1 year and then we'll go out to 5 years. If the override fails, then there is a budget. That's what we're calling the base budget, and that's whatever article is up in front of the town meeting warrant. That base budget would close the library, make the cut to the schools, and do all of that this year. And then in future years, what would you do? You would have to keep cutting things to close whatever hole you have, or find additional sources of revenue. You know, are there any good things in the future? Of course there are, right? So the town has agreements with the marijuana grow facility. If it gets up and running, it's $230,000 of revenue. At some point, at the end of 5 years, you have excluded debt that would roll off your tax burden. So that doesn't affect the town budget as much as it affects yours. There would be a difference for you. But really, we're looking at bare bones for 5 years. And I haven't thought about what cuts you would do in year 3 because the ones in year 2 are so painful. What would you be left with? Personally, you know, I would like to attack the school bus transportation contract. I think we have to anyway, but we have to try to get at it. This is where I'm a little bit more of a bull in the china shop. My energy level might go up. I'll even stand up. If other people do it, we can. So if Sutton has a program for its school bus transportation that makes sense, and I call the TA over there and he says, you know, actually, Matt, we make money on this over here. Well, then I don't want to hear any analysis about how much we're going to lose. I'm tired of hearing that. It can be done. And the more research I did, the more I found out more towns do it. Because we can't make it in a world where there's only one bidder on every contract we put out. So the town of Bengtson, which is also very similar to us, except that it's in a different county, they run all their school, the yellow buses and the sped buses, the wheelchair buses. So if they can do it, and they balance their budget, and everybody's happy with it, then those are the kinds of things we have to open our minds up to here. We have to do that anyway, but it would be really important to get those things kicked up. Now, what's the other thing? Health insurance. We would have to accelerate. So really, every 2 or 3 years, we need to take another shot at health insurance. Either by increasing the premium co-share that our employees pay, or by increasing the deductible. We have to do at least one of those things once in the next 5 years, even if the override passes. If the override doesn't pass, we'll have to do it twice. So, and that's a big nut. That's like 146,000 each time we whack at it. Those, to me, that's our best option. I like to think big term strategy stuff. What I'd really like the state legislature to do is start to really look at how we're arranged. I'm not a fan of Worcester County retirement. They're 43% funded, for goodness sake. You know, if we can come up with a better plan ourselves, then let us get out of it. You know, if they can't run the place, then give us a chance to survive. This most recent year, they had a great year, so I'll back off the criticism a little bit. They had extraordinary returns this year, but a pension plan is a very delicate thing. We're a tiny, tiny piece of it. The city's killing everybody. Let's get honest about it. And the same thing with the BVT contract. It was entered into by the town of Douglas back in 1964. This thing needs to be redone. And one of the things we need to be able to do is say, we shouldn't have to get 5 votes. If we're feeling like we're getting creamed, we should be able to raise the flag and say, you know, tap out. And just say that, you know, 110 kids from Douglas, that's too many. You just can't keep doing this to us with impunity. There should at least be a process that doesn't require 5 town meetings to vote it down. Those are the kinds of relief we need at the state level, because frankly, we don't have the bargaining power to go tell Dr. Fitzpatrick what to do. So I hope I'm answering your question. There's health insurance reductions, there's the street lights. I have thoughts about the way we buy fuel, but I would need money to build a place. We're paying retail right now for gasoline, which is, I think it's beyond nuts, but you need a place to get it. If you're gonna have a fuel depot, you need a place to put it. And a lot of our town facilities are in the watershed district. But, you know, those are the kinds of things we can save money operationally, but it will eventually come back to cuts, service level cuts.
When you talk about closing the library next year, you're talking about closing the building.
Well,
But you don't have to close.
Do you have a plan for if the building closes? I'm sure you've thought of some other ways of dealing with that.
well, the library, like everything else, is so complicated. The building was deeded to the town with the stipulation that it be a public library by the Fairfield family, and we've always been in conformity with that, so we haven't had to think about what we would do if we didn't run the library out of the building anymore. Would it revert to the family? What happens to it? The trustees don't really have a large trust to manage. I heard the other night, I heard Mr. Biagioni say something like through January. So, I mean, there's just not a there in terms of that institution. It's almost all salary expense and benefit expense on our side.
But you don't have to close the library if it doesn't pass, because it's $227,000, and we got that in free cash. Now, somebody would argue, yeah, we're just kicking the can down, but you know something? This town's been doing that for a long time, and I understand the ramifications and the implications, but it's a conscious decision being made. So,
The free cash that's certified today
right.
is expected to be spent at the town meetings. So there isn't an additional $200,000 to appropriate.
Aren't we moving $300,000 or $200,000 plus dollars to the stabilization account based on land that we purchased down on Royal Crest that would easily fill this gap? But fortunately, that's a separate article.
It is a separate article, and it would be up to the monitor whether or not he thought was in the scope of the article to even transfer that to an operating budget, which we do know, think we will.
But again, there are options. There are options.
But I don't know that there will be an option at this town meeting.
No,
Because if the moderator doesn't feel like it's in the scope of the article, by that it says, you know, we sent out a warrant article, we said this is what we're going to do. If the moderator doesn't think that that amendment would give enough notice to people to vote differently, then he would rule that out of order to use it for the library. So I caution people to think that's an easy grab.
I didn't say it was an easy grab.
Yeah.
I just said it's an option that
But I'm not
have
sure
been
if we
considered,
need option.
as opposed to zeroing out and then creating the alarming that we really don't have capability to keep that library open for another year. We actually do. But as you say, articles have been created, monies have been spent, land down on Royal Crest Drive was purchased for whatever reason, and now we've got some funds and we're coming back from free cash, we're gonna put that back into our $1.2 billion stabilization balance.
Well, the money that's being put back into stabilization was to put,
Money that we
and
use.
stabilization is like a savings account for the town.
Right.
So we have an account that we have in case something extraordinary comes up that we need to pull that from. The town actually has a policy that says we will have 5% of our operating revenues in stabilization should the town need it. We received money from a settlement many years ago, and I don't recall the year we received it. It was really for the water department, but because we didn't have a fund to kind of put the money away, we put it into our stabilization account. When they purchased the land, they took that money out to purchase. So we're actually just putting the money back to maintain our 5%.
So, in my past, I was Director of Human Services in the city of Woonsocket, and I was responsible for the senior center, and I know there are times in the day with which one should not violate what you have scheduled for the rest of your afternoon. So I guess I'll take one more, and then we'll let you go do the rest of your day. Ma'am?
So the selectmen have said repeatedly that the, next year, if the override doesn't pass, the senior center will close. Can you talk about the ramifications on the seniors about, what exactly will happen if that should occur next year?
Here's my reaction to that. The senior center, in its total expenditure, is much smaller than the library. So if you're trying to manage to a number, keeping this place open, which is a priority, is a little bit easier to do, to get, and the numbers work. But, there's nothing worse than making silly promises when you don't know the future. So if the budget were really difficult, then it would be one of the things, just in rank ordering, are we gonna run police cars, are we gonna plow the snow, are we gonna run the ambulance? Yes, yes, and yes. And if we do all those things, there isn't any money left for the senior center, and we can't find a way to put it together, that's that eventuality. And I don't think it's inappropriate to say that it's very possible, given that we see that rolling deficit every year at 300, 400,000. I just, like I say, I think we've cut almost everything that humanly could be cut, including the library at this point. If you're thinking a year ahead of now, what would we do?
I have a two-part question, if I haven't forgotten it. How much effort is put into attracting business to the town of Douglas? Because that tax money would be good. Secondly, I know that there's no water, sewer on some of these properties that are available, but could the town, if they got somebody that was really, really interested, could they make some kind of a deal with the state? I don't know how it works with these bonds. Maybe take out bonds and then have to pay them back. But if they had the tax money coming in from the businesses, then maybe it would help. I don't know. This is just my mind going whirling.
No, I mean, those are excellent points. I just said I was involved with the senior center in Woonsocket, but at the same time, I was the economic development director for the city while we were bankrupt. There's a trick to this. Businesses want to find properties that are ready for them to build upon. Water, sewer, and now the new bugaboo these days that everybody wants is natural gas for heat, because they don't want to pay for oil. And obviously, electricity, three-phase power if they can get it. There are a couple of attractive areas in town, because you're close to 146, one would be off of Davis Street, the other is off of Gilboa. Gilboa is the most interesting to me, because you have water. It's all chuck wad because you have the wrong size pipes. You have a small pipe going into a big pipe going back into a small pipe. And if you've ever played with that, you know what that's like. It's a hammer. But that project is reasonable. if we split it with the water department, if we find grant money. So we're investigating what's called an economic development grant through the Department of Commerce at the federal level. Because you can get grants for the economic infrastructure. It's a match, but if we found a way to fund half of it and then split it with the water department, now it's cheap money for the opportunity to develop a property significantly. As I said earlier, you have a single tax rate, so you see the business go up, it's not a huge. The way it works is that if you add more value to the tax base, everybody's tax bill would get lower because you have a bigger denominator in the fraction. That's what economic development does, until you split your rate. So there's a lot of thinking going into what's going on. I have to say my biggest frustration in the world of economic development was always the same thing, and it's property owners. Because if you have 7 or 8 pieces you're trying to put together, we know the game, right? If you're the last one, the price per acre you get, because they need you desperately, right? So it becomes a game of, can we get everybody to the table at the same time and agree to the same kind of plan so that we don't have that game where there's a holdout? That was the problem over at Pine. There were 2 problems. One is, this area is blessed with sand and gravel, which has its ups and downs. Nothing was moving, but then the economy started to pick up, so now he's mining it, and he's killing it. So he's rushing along, but for the longest time it was just sitting there. But the ideal world, there would be a road that would go into access, and there's 6 or 7 property owners, I think, back there, who all have to sign off on that proposal. The town did a lot of work on that before I started here. Still a live wire. I'm a little bit more interested legally in the Davis Street 146 interchange because there have been some funky things that happened in the past between the town of Douglas and the town of Uxbridge. And a lot of that land on that border is owned either by the town of Douglas or the town of Uxbridge.
Yeah.
So a conversation between the 2 towns, and there's tax trouble on a couple of those lots that we're pursuing. Shh, I didn't say that in public. I'm letting you in on the secret. But if we put it all together, it won't be a secret for very long. But if we put all that together, we would actually have a viable piece of property close to the highway.
Watching the clock.
Yeah, all right, this will be the last one. Sir in the back, because you raised your hand a couple times.
With the water bill, I've been paying $65 in the construction. When that gonna be in?
The surcharge on the water bill for the construction.
Yes, that is coming to an end. I don't recall the year though, but I'll let Patrice know and she can get back to you.
Okay, and also another question is about the $50 fee that we pay. What do they go for there?
On the water bill,
On the water bill?
the $50 fee. That's another tap on something, right?
No, we only have one piece that's left. We had the design and we have the construction. The design was paid off. Is the fee the minimum?
Yeah, $50, and then they have the $63 for the.
Yeah, the 63 is the one that's scheduled to go away. The $50, I think that's just their base fee.
Sounds like your minimum.
Yeah, and another thing is, you're talking about the transportation for the kids to go to school, how the budget is so big. Why don't the parents take the kids to school instead of using the bus?
Or contribute to the cost.
And that would save money too.
Like they do in Oxford.
Well, that's one of those can't do it things, but all the towns around us do it, so we're pushing the envelope on that. Not accepting no for an answer just yet.
That would save money.
You want to add the state required up till 6th grade, like there is a state.
Yeah, you have to have a seat for them.
You gotta have a bus for 6th grade.
All right, thanks, folks. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.